Welcome to the Dreamboat. Remember, you can join the DRI for just £30 a year. You get access to more content, including videos and discounts for our events. It's a great way of finding out more about our work, joining our dream community, and supporting this podcast. Details in the show notes and at driccpe.org.uk/membership.
Welcome to the Dreamboat podcast, a place where we talk about everything dreamy, all you wanted to know about dreams and where you might find some answers. My name is Laura Payne and I'm a psychotherapist and associate of the Dream Research Institute, the DRI, here in London, England. And I'm joined by fellow psychotherapist and TV presenter, Melinda Messenger.
Hello, I'm Melinda Messenger and I'm also part of the Dream Research Institute, and together we're a group of dream weavers and catchers, and we're called the Dreamboat because we are recording our podcast by the canal here at Little Venice in London. So listen out for the ducks.
I love talking about dreams, working with them and exploring them. So join us for this fortnightly series when we'll be looking at dreams, talking to experts in the field and answering your questions.
In the show notes, you will find ways of getting in touch with us and the team via the DRI website and on the standard online places such as Instagram and Facebook. And our social media links are all in the show notes. So let's now get on with the episode.
There is an increasing fascination in the world of psychedelics, such as the South American plant, Ayahuasca, and in Europe, magic mushrooms, which for the academic, psilocybin, and the role that these plants might play in modern medicine going forward. Of course, this world of hallucinations is closely linked with the world of dreaming and the visionary. Since biblical times, we've been interested in the healing power of the dream and the spiritual vision, with stories obviously such as Joseph and of the sort of Technicolor Dreamcoat fame being part of this sort of long mythology and handing down, one could argue, of wisdom. So I'm joined again today by DRI associate Maria Nasdravan, who has actually worked in this developing area. So welcome, Maria.
Thank you, Laura. It's good to be back. And yes, this is such an interesting topic. I'm very glad we get to explore it more in depth today in relation to dreams. And we're joined by someone who is very knowledgeable in this world, Dr. Simon Ruffell, who is a British psychiatrist, a psychedelic researcher, and a student of curanderismo. I hope I said that right, Simon. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. It's a real pleasure to be here.
Simon, can you just explain the last Spanish word, what it actually means?
Curanderismo, yeah, for sure.
It.
So curanderismo is the word that the communities in South America often use to describe the work that they do with psychedelic plants like ayahuasca. In the West, we quite often use the word shaman, and that isn't actually technically correct. The word shaman actually refers to a very specific group of people based in Siberia, but we've adopted it to mean anyone who seems to work in this world of spirits. And now, ironically, even though it's incorrect, the curanderos in South America are also beginning to adopt it because most Western people just refer to them as shamans. So for the rest of this conversation, I'll just use the word shaman or curandero interchangeably, but that's loosely what it means. Somebody who works in the world of spirits through trance states.
Okay, Simon, lovely. Thank you for the great explanation. I suppose the sort of key question really is, how did you get involved in all of this?
So I started off as a psychiatrist and I was working in the NHS for quite some years. But after a while, I began to get pretty disillusioned, particularly with the pharmacological treatments that we were using. I mean, there are some exceptions, and psychiatry does do a good job in some areas. It's particularly good in terms of safety, so keeping people safe, making sure that they don't hurt other people. And I'm not against drug treatments, I'm not against psychiatry, but I think that pharmaceutical drugs are overused. So, for example, in depression, they were never used, antidepressants were never supposed to be a long-term thing. They were only supposed to be used in the short term. And we've gone a bit drug mad in psychiatry. And it's not just me that thinks this. In fact, the vast majority of psychiatrists that I know and respect also think this as well. And so after a couple of years of working in psychiatry, I thought, right, I'm going to take a bit of a break. I'm going to be honest, I don't know what I thought I was going to do. I thought I'm going to take a bit of a break and then try and figure out what it is I'm going to do next. And I ended up, by a chance, a stroke of, I don't know, I like to think of it as fate, perhaps, sitting next to somebody who was training to be a curandero in a cafe in Guatemala. They were actually training in the Amazon rainforest in Peru with a group of people called the Shipibo. And believe it or not, they were actually on holiday in this same cafe that I was in. And I got talking to this man, and he told me all of these stories about the way that he was working with ayahuasca, the way that he was training with this indigenous group in the Peruvian Amazon called the Shipibo, using this psychedelic brew ayahuasca. And he'd been using it to treat many of the conditions that I've been struggling to treat for many years. And so I went down to the Amazon rainforest with him and I drank ayahuasca. And I saw that you could just spend time with these people. You could spend time with the Shipibo. You could train with them. You could learn with them. I found it amazing that unlike psilocybin, there was this whole lineage that still existed. These people saying that they could communicate with spirits, that they could interact with energy. And if they choose to train you, and then you can stay there and you can learn from them. And so I started training alongside psychiatry, my work as a psychiatrist, and doing research as well. So I set up an organization that does research, did a PhD into ayahuasca and mental health. And the organization's name is Onaya. So I really try to approach my work in those three areas: psychiatry, the research, psychology, and then also training in shamanism.
Well, that's all of it is quite fascinating, and I know obviously we want to talk about dreams as part of this. But I know my work as a psychotherapist, a lot of the SSRIs, and there's been a lot of chat about it recently. How they keep people almost locked in the sort of depression cycle. And I know the studies in particular of psilocybin, and particularly microdosing of psilocybin, might change that field forever. And I think that personally is incredibly exciting. How do you put all of this together with dreams? Because obviously, I've got friends who've done vision quests as part of their shamanic training and whatnot. And it seems very similar to the dream world. How does this work for you, Simon?
Well, interestingly, when you train in curanderismo, the most important part of that training, the most important thing is dreams. So all of the curanderos say, yes, well, you need to go into ayahuasca ceremonies. You need to drink ayahuasca. You need to see what happens within those ceremonies. But be careful, because when you're training, you can misinterpret things. There's this huge part of the training with ayahuasca is what's you and what's the plant. And that takes years to be able to differentiate what comes from you and what's, in this paradigm external. And so when you're training in curanderismo, all of the teachers, the maestros, they say, listen to your dreams. The dream world is the most important communication that you have from the plants, from the spirits, from these entities. And it's also the cleanest, because when you're in ceremonies, your own interpretation, your own desires can come through in the ceremony. So for example, I've been in ceremonies with people where they've got a message from ayahuasca that the girl across the room from them in the ceremony is going to be their wife, and they don't even know them, but they just need to go up to them and they need to ask them to marry them because this beautiful woman clearly wants to be with them because ayahuasca told them.
It sounds like dream dating.
Dream dating, exactly. And then they get quite a shock when, of course, this woman who has no idea what's going on, doesn't know this person, says, well, clearly not. I'm not going to marry you. I don't even know you. And so there's clearly room for misinterpretation. With dreams, that does exist, but to a lesser degree. So when you have a dream, quite often you'll experience an emotion. It just kind of happened. And so when you wake up, you can try to interpret it. You can think about it, you can discuss it. But it usually has already happened. And so it's a clearer kind of communication. And even when you become a curandero, you're still listening to your dreams. You get a huge amount of information through your dreams when you're outside of ceremony. So it's really key to this kind of training in medicine.
This is so interesting. It reminds me of the conversation you and I had, Simon, a while ago about dreams and the two perspectives. And so what is the perspective in the Shipibo culture then? Where do dreams come from for them?
The Shipibo do say that you can get noise in dreams as well. So that it can just be your unconscious processes. It can be that you're just processing things. If it's things from the day that come up in your dreams, then that could just be the case, that you're just working through subconscious material. But largely, they believe that the dreams are external to you, that it's a communication from an entity that is, I'm hastened to say, outside of you, because it's not quite as clear cut as spirits aren't part of us, spirits are external. And actually, when you train in curanderismo, a lot of the work that you do is fusing with spirit, is joining so that you're becoming one with a particular spirit. So I don't want to say it's an external source, but for the purposes of this conversation, they believe that it's coming from somewhere that's outside of your consciousness. It's a communication, almost like if I were to send you a message on WhatsApp. It's that kind of interpretation.
It reminds me of how we work in our Western kind of paradigm, and maybe a Jungian way of distinguishing which dreams come from, or maybe try not to let the ego get in the way of the interpretation, the way you said, wow, the girl fancies me, I'm just going to go over and make her my wife. Are they dreams from the self, capital S self, or are they just our unconscious desires and biases presented to us in our dreams? And it takes so much discrimination to know which one it is, which voice you listen to.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Maria, I know that you've actually worked in this field as a dream worker and a dream guide. Tell me what happens. How does that play out?
Well, I like to integrate dreams in with supporting people who work with psychedelics because I think my understanding is, and Simon, please chime in, that once you start preparing for a journey like this, your psyche activates way before. And in my experience, people start having dreams, and it's the way I understand it, the psyche is preparing the ground for the journey. And often I hear from people messages in the dreams about what the work might be about. And it gives us a chance to deepen and do some of that before they go in. And then they can get much deeper with the plant medicine that they're working with. And then we work with them in integration. And dreams kind of help complete the work, what wasn't finished in the session or what needs to be done further for them. Is this what you also see in your work, Simon?
Massively. So interestingly, I see it a lot more when people are going into a spiritual container. So before I was running my organization, Onaya, that does research in the Amazon rainforest with ayahuasca with curanderos, I was based at King's College London working on psilocybin trials. And when I was based at King's, I didn't really see that much of it. So people were coming into the hospital, they were having, proper psychotherapy for preparation and integration. They would have their dosing session and, dreams weren't really that much of a feature. With the use of ayahuasca in the Amazon rainforest, I'd say about 50% of the time, people say, I swear, I can feel it working already. I swear, I've been dreaming about it. I've been dreaming about this experience. I've been dreaming about the kind of stuff, like you said, that's going to come up in the experience before I even got there. And, maybe it's because the kind of people who go to the Amazon rainforest are more spiritually inclined. Maybe they're more in tune with this. Maybe they're more open. Could be that. Probably is a factor. But at the same time, you can't deny there's an uncanny similarity. And there's a huge number of people who are really experiencing the process starting before they get there, and this communication through their dreams. And the curanderos, the shamans, they specifically say that the work starts way before you actually get to the Amazon rainforest to drink ayahuasca. They say specifically, when you make the decision to drink ayahuasca, it starts working on you then. And so when you're actually in the ceremony, that's just really the kind of the peak of the experience, but it's actually been working in you for a while. And you can see that through the communication with dreams.
I find that really fascinating because I've been involved in a lot of spiritual retreats without psychedelics. And most people will say to you, the minute you've made the decision to start the retreat, it starts working. And it is usually the dream space where you recognize that something is changing, as if the psyche is getting itself ready or whatever's coming your way. And what I really like about the people that you're working with in the Amazon is the fact that, and a lot of people working with ayahuasca see that the plant spirits start coming towards you before you, as you say, you've always sipped anything. And I'm fascinated also by the fact that groups like the Shipibo, they've been looking at this for thousands of years from the sound of things. They've got a wisdom that goes back, an experiential wisdom that goes back, passing this. I mean, it's not a folklore anymore, is it? For them, this is their medicine and their experiences that it works.
Mm-hmm. Oh, for sure. And so when I first started drinking ayahuasca and going to the Amazon rainforest and doing the research, it was 2015. And I had a long process over about 4 years of approaching it from a very Western scientific background. So I was a psychiatrist. I understood the world through science. And whenever I would go to the Amazon rainforest, I'd be faced with all of these things that I just couldn't make sense of. I would have these experiences in ceremony, and Don Rono Lopez, who later became my maestro, who I was apprenticing under, would say to me, yes, Simon, the reason that you're seeing all of these faces, because these are spirits that are trying to communicate with you, you should really communicate with them. And I would say, well, actually, I think you'll find, Don Rono, that my brain is, all of our brains are experts at predicting the faces, because that's the thing that we see. They're expert predictive mechanisms. And so that's the reason I keep seeing all of these faces. And it was becoming harder and harder for me to fit the experience that I had into a Western framework. And the looks that I would get from the curanderos when I would say, I just don't think I don't think the thing that I saw was actually a spirit. I think the fact I've just had this dream is because I was processing what was happening during the day. You were talking about spirits, so that's why I'm having all of these incredible mystical experiences in my dreams. And they would look at me like I was completely insane. They would just look at me as in like, and Rono would say to me repeatedly, I mean, maybe that's what's happening. Or could you just be completely ignoring what's right in front of you? So it's not even a case of belief. It's just experience. This is happening, and we know it's happening, and we know it's real because we're experiencing it. But then ironically, I would come back to King's College London, where I was based, and every so often pluck up the courage to say to another psychiatrist, do you think there could be any truth in what these indigenous peoples are saying about spirits? And I get the exact same response. Like, they would look at me like I was completely insane and just be like, you spent way too much time drinking ayahuasca in the Amazon rainforest. And so there is this difference between the similarities and difference where it's ironic that they're both saying and thinking the exact same things about each other. Like all, I mean, it's two sets of doctors. Doctors are notoriously competitive in my experience as well, with kind of different specialties.
Exactly. Yeah.
What I really like about your work, Simon, is that you're not trying to impose a Western view on the Shipibo, trying to fit their cosmology into ours, or the other way around. And you're holding the tension between these two different perspectives. And that to me is very valuable. I also remember from our conversation before that you said in your training with them, you've followed your dreams and you've been more tuned to their way of interpreting the dreams, which is quite specific. They seem to have their own cosmology around it. And I was wondering if you could...
specific,
yeah, could you tell us a bit about how they interpret dreams?
They have what they call codes. So you have these dream codes, and you can study these dream codes. And so they basically, they're it's like lists of how you interpret certain things. But then when you go to the Amazon rainforest, it's not just the curanderos that know these codes. Anyone from that region will know. Like I've had conversations before when I've got in the back of one of these little motor car taxis, and I've had a dream the night before, and I've been trying to figure it out, and I've just got into conversation with the motor car driver. And I've said, yeah, no, I'm okay. Yeah, I just had this dream and X, Y, Z happened. And he said, yes, that's this. And I've been like, what? And then I've like checked with the curanderos. So, yeah, no, he's quite right. Yeah, that's that. And it's within the culture, these codes. And they get incredibly specific. So, you have a lot of the codes that they use are the same when it comes to dream interpretation, according to Freud or according to Jung. So, for example, like the house representing either the psyche or the body, you have things like that, which are very universal. And then you have other codes, which are just so ridiculously specific. So, for example, if you dream of poo, then it means that you're going to suddenly receive a lot of money. But if you don't see the poo in the dream, it means money's coming, but it's going to take a while, probably a few months. But if you see it, watch out, because there's going to be a lot of money coming. So you're going to do really well. And just things like that, when it's like, well, how could that? That's so specific. And then it's happened to me.
Hang on a second, Simon.
Sorry, yeah, go for it.
I love that. I was going to say, audience, if that happens to you, can you just give us an update on how that toilet panned out for you?
And for donations.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It is incredible, though. And I've had it on a number of occasions where I've dreamt of poo. And then I've woken up and I've been like, oh, here we go. And then something's happened, like...
it's a lottery!
Yeah, or like Onaya's received like a big donation. And I've been like, amazing, like, okay. Or the last time, I got a new job. And I was like, on the day. So I had the dream of the poo, and then that day got a new job. I was like, okay, I mean, it could be coincidence, but that's pretty good. It's pretty bang on, pretty specific.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, I'm actually liking that. We talked about toilet dreams a little while ago, and so I think we might have to go back and review that episode a bit.
Add this in.
It's really interesting because I think in a Jungian or in our Western perspective, we would interpret poo dreams very differently as, shadow or discarded stuff that you want to get rid of. And it's so different here. Although if I look at a very core archetypal idea, I can see poo, shadow, Pluto, riches. I can see how that connection can exist. What I'm really curious about, Simon, is clearly your dreams have adapted. And you now speak that language rather maybe than this language. Have you seen that happen with your dreams since your training?
Massively. So whenever I learn new codes, it's almost like that is now that's the way that I'll interpret that dream. And so another one, for example, would be flooding. So if there's a lot of water, if there's flooding, it usually means that you're overwhelmed. For me personally, it means kind of I'm exhausted, I'm a bit run down. And before I learned that code, that I never experienced that. I would never have dreams about lots of water. I would never have dreams about flooding. And then I learned it and was like, oh, okay, so flooding means exhaustion. And it's like it's been programmed into my mind. And so now whenever I dream about flooding, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm exhausted. But it's because I know it exists. Same with the poo. Like I've been, I've got jobs in the past, I've received donations for Onaya in the past as well. But I never dreamt of poo beforehand and was never like, that's it. That's what it means. It's a poo's been there the whole time. That's what it means. It was since I learnt that code, I then started having those dreams. But interestingly, with the receiving money, it's always been the night. So I'll dream and then the money will come the next day. It's not that I receive the money and then I dream about poo the night after. It's precognitive.
Yeah, I'm interested in that because I was thinking how much of that is just a brain feedback loop. So the psyche's thinking, okay, well, we've got some money and so let's have a poo dream. Or, the psyche's saying to us, we're feeling run down, let's have a flooding dream. So it's as always with a lot of sort of dream interpretation, what comes first, what influences it. And obviously our own cultural input, there's the intersection of a lot of things that happen at nighttime when we're asleep, where there's cultural input. And so, for instance, I was thinking with the Shipibo, they have got their codes. And so they're embedded in that mythology and imagery in some way, in the way that a Jungian would approach things probably in a different way with its own imagery.
Yeah.
Have you found in your code work, I suppose what I'm thinking here is not necessarily chicken and egg, which becomes first, but have you found any universal crossover in interpretation work.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, so the imagery of the houses, that's been, that there's a lot of crossover. There's a lot of crossover with that. And actually, when I was studying curanderismo, one of the maestros that I was studying with, he was married to a lady from Lima in Peru who had a more Western understanding of dream interpretation, and she would draw all of these parallels as well between the Shipibo and between Freud and between Jung. And so there is this crossover. There does seem to be these universal codes that all of us would, to a certain degree, even if we haven't studied dreams, things that we'd already be attuned to. But it's just that the Shipibo get really, really specific. So another really specific one that I haven't experienced yet, but maybe in the future, is if you are playing football in a dream and you score a goal, it means that you're going to get pregnant. So it is, yeah.
Difficult one for a man playing football in a dream.
Well, I mean, I took that to mean that maybe you as a couple might get, or somebody's getting pregnant. But yeah, so there are these really specific things that are just.
Hang on, I'm just going to stop you there, Simon. Again, audience, if you do that and that happens, could you let us know? This is great research.
Yeah. It is fascinating though. I never stop being amazed by the dreams, and the more that I engage in the plant medicine training in curanderismo, the more that the dreams open. It's like this continual thing. The more that you engage, the more that your dreams open, and it's absolutely incredible, especially the precognitive dreams, because that's something that I can't explain it in any other way than through the Shipibo paradigm.
Yeah. I find, as always, when we've talked about precog dreams, that's the bit that scientists find really hard to work out what the hell is going on there, because you really are making a leap of scientific faith in some way, whereas anything spiritual has got all sorts of explanations for it that's been rooted over thousands of years back to, Joseph and the Technicolor Dreamcoat, sort of biblical stories. What I'm left with, I've never done ayahuasca, and I just wonder, I don't know if you have, Maria. Simon, what's it like? What happens when you take it? I know from friends that have tried it, it's keeping it down to begin with is the hardest part.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't taste great. That's kind of one thing that is quite famous for. It's difficult to describe what ayahuasca is like because it can be so different. It's like a dream. It's like saying, what is a dream like? And it's like, well, it really depends on the content of that dream. And so perhaps one of the ways that I can help to explain this is through, I'm going to explain it from a Western point of view, and I'll explain it from a spiritual point of view. So from a Western point of view, ayahuasca contains DMT, dimethyltryptamine, which is a potent psychedelic substance, and it binds to serotonin receptors in the brain. And it also contains monoamine oxidase inhibitors, which prevent the DMT from being broken down by enzymes in the stomach. And so as a result of that, you have this incredibly potent psychedelic, which is active throughout your body. So it's active within your stomach, and it's active within your brain, and it's flowing through your blood. And so quite often you get intense psychedelic visions, or hallucinations would be the kind of the scientific way of saying that. From a Shipibo and spiritual point of view, ayahuasca is a vessel that you use to take you to the spirit world. And then when you're in the spirit world, you can engage with lots of different spirits that you've met through your training, that you've formed allies with, dark spirits that you're trying to get rid of that are stuck to you, spirits that other people have sent to you, spirits that just happen to be walking by. It's kind of like being in a city when you can go outside your door and you can engage with a whole host of different people. And so when we think about it like that, ayahuasca can really be anything. Are you working through your trauma, in which case you could be reliving something and it could be an extremely challenging experience? Are you communicating with some kind of divine being, in which case it would be an incredible mystical experience, so on and so forth. So maybe that gives a bit more of an indication of what the ayahuasca experience is like. And there's also a lot of vomiting.
Regardless of the perspective.
regardless of what you're doing. Everyone agrees there's a hell of a lot of vomiting. Oh, yeah.
Oh, I know. But that would probably put me off. I was thinking while you were describing it, particularly as a psychiatrist, you must see deep links between that and the psychotic state.
For sure. I mean, there are similarities between the two. Absolutely. I mean, I guess one of the key differences between psychosis and between the psychedelic state, or if we're thinking about ayahuasca, is that when you have delusional beliefs, for example, or that detachment from reality, you're really in your own world and other people don't agree that that is based in reality. Whereas when you're engaging with the shipibo, when you're drinking ayahuasca, actually many people believe that that is a form of reality, a completely legitimate form of reality to be in. And they'll also be able to understand what it is that you're going through. So there is that distinct difference. Also, I mean, with psychosis, you have that detachment from reality, whereas arguably with ayahuasca, you're potentially going into a deeper sense of reality or just an alternative sense of reality as well. So psychedelics used to be referred to as psychomimetics, so they mimic psychosis. Psychotomimetics, they mimic psychosis. But that's since been, that term is no longer used and is not thought to be representative of what psychedelics actually do.
Do you think this is one of the reasons why that, and the earlier LSD studies, I know that was interrupted because of the Vietnam War, but do you think this is one of the reasons why Western medicine has held off exploring this for as long as it has done, because of the fears of how to interpret these type of states?
I mean, I think that's definitely one reason. So I think there is fear surrounding it. There's a lack of understanding. There's confusion. What the hell is this? What is the psychedelic state? So, and there definitely would be some concerns with safety as well. But that being said, I think that a lot of the reason, in fact, the majority of the reason that people haven't been engaging with psychedelics scientifically is largely for political reasons. So when you begin to work with psychedelics, we know from research that quite often they can change your personality. They can make you more left-wing, they can make you more peaceful, they can make you more connected to nature, more connected to yourself and to others. And when there was the Vietnam War, that didn't bode very well for getting young men to join up to go into the US military. So that's something that we do need to be considering now. That being said, though, psychedelics don't always do that. And there is a line of thought that thinks that psychedelics are actually what we call non-specific amplifiers. So they actually amplify what's already there. So, for example, I have a lot of people saying to me, if only Donald Trump drank ayahuasca. Yeah, I mean, he might suddenly become a nicer person, or he might just get insights into being more of a narcissistic ruler. It can help with that. And there are numerous biker gangs in the US that used to take lots of LSD and then go out and commit murder, mow people down. Cults as well that have used psychedelics to do horrendous things. So it's not just a case of give somebody the psychedelic, they turn into a nicer person. There's a good chance of that happening, but it could just also amplify what's already there. And we see that with ayahuasca a bit as well. When people start drinking ayahuasca, sometimes you can see this ego inflation, this spiritual narcissism. It usually goes away after people, if they keep drinking ayahuasca, because you then realize that actually when you thought you knew everything, you suddenly realize you know pretty much nothing, and then the learning really starts. But it's just something you have to watch out for sure.
Fascinating. I mean, it's a subject that just keeps on giving, obviously. And so, Simon, many thanks for joining us today and sharing your work. What's the next sort of steps for you in terms of where you're going with your research?
So at the moment, I'm in the process of developing an initiative called the Indigenous Knowledge and Science Initiative, which looks to bring together indigenous healers from around the world to design scientific studies together with scientists so that we have this weaving together of different ways of knowing. We're doing that in the Amazon rainforest, but we're one of the few groups that are actually doing that. So this project is trying to form this relationship to try and really develop this new way of doing science. So I fully believe that when we start listening to each other and we stop assuming that different people are idiots and don't know anything, that's when we'll really progress in terms of science and on knowing, and potentially as a species as well. So it's trying to form the basis of that. It's a difficult task and it's going to take ages, but I'll keep you posted on how it develops.
Sounds amazing. Thank you, Simon.
Real pleasure to be here, and thank you so much for inviting me.
So, thank you for joining us for this week's episode. Don't forget to like us and leave comments on your favourite podcast platform. As I'm sure you know, that's the way we build an audience for the Dreamboat podcast and also to spread news about dreaming. And as we said, there are many ways you can share your dreams at the DRI, the Dream Research Institute.
Yes, we have courses, events, and workshops, and we want to hear from you. So check out the show notes for links, or find us on Instagram and on our Facebook page and on our website at driccpe.org.uk. And if you want to explore your dreams further, or you would like to support us, you can join the DRI as a member for just £30 a year. As a member, you will get discounts for all of our events and short courses. You'll get our newsletter with latest dream research news, and we'll also be adding other special member benefits during the year. Of course, members' dreams will always be given preference for reading on the podcast Dream of the Week slot. So go to the link on the show notes and become a DRI member today. Keep dreaming and keep sharing your dreams.